All right, we're live. Back again. This is the RG NFL DFS Tournament Takes podcast. I am your host, Chris Kirkwood, Kikdiese, here with my boys. Both of them who had pretty good weeks last week. One maybe a little bit better than the other, but two solid weeks. But KillaB 2482, Brett Hartfield, John Sarabian, JSURab. How's it going, fellas?
Doing well, coming off a good week 2 for me. I had a losing week 1, so but yeah, let's roll it over to John here, who I think went over triple digits if I saw the screenshot correctly. How are you feeling?
Yeah, so feeling pretty good. One thing that I promised the guys I would gloat about was my Travis Kelce 5% call that I had on the pod yesterday. He came right around 5% on a lot of my DK tournaments. I think FanDuel, though, he was a little higher, like around 8 or 9. So I don't want to say on both sites, but on DK he was around 5. So I was pretty happy about that. I just had a really good feeling that tight end was going to be a pay down spot. And me and Brett and Chris were talking before the show, and we were talking about Kittle and Cook and how they were just so highly owned. They garnered about 53% of the ownership roughly in some of the DK tournaments, big DK tournaments. So that was kind of crazy. But yeah, I had a really good week. I hit 2 qualifiers, the World Championship and the King of the Beach qualifier. I think it was the $50 and the $20 for the King of the Beach. And then I came in 4th in 2 big tournaments, one on DK and one on FanDuel. So it ended up being a really good week.
Yeah,
So,
even though he has this great week, before the show even starts, he has to pout about how he ends up only getting 4th place in the FanDuel. Yeah, the Minnesota
I'm sorry,
game.
that Clay Matthews hit. I'm sorry, that Clay Matthews hit ruined.
The Minnesota game.
It ruined it for me.
Cost him some dollars.
Dude, I understand that. There's nothing worse like when you like think you're going to win and like so first of all, all the equity is in the top. We all know that in these tournaments. So like
Big time on FanDuel. Big time on FanDuel.
Big time, yep.
big time on
200K,
DK too. I mean, I hear you. I
There's
hear you.
a noticeable difference though from FanDuel to DraftKings, like top heaviness.
Yeah.
Regardless, both top heavy. Like it's so you got to realize that equity when you're there. And so I get that. And like when you like feel like you're going to win and you like I've had nights where I was absolutely smashing and like there was no way I could possibly lose and like all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. And you know, I ended up winning like I remember one sticks out in my head. I thought I was going to win 85 grand and I ended up winning like 22,000. And I remember I was working at the time. I go into work and I'm like, I'm so pissed I won 22 grand. It was the worst 22 grand I ever won in my life. You know what I mean? So I get that. We've all been there. We understand it. You got to realize your equity. But why don't you tell us quickly, how'd you win? Break down the lineup.
Yeah, so pretty much what I did was I had like I said, I had a Mahomes stack and I stacked them with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And then I brought it back with some Juju. And then I kind of filled it out. I had Kittle in my flex, which that was a little rough to watch towards the end. But I had Kittle in my flex. I had Will Fuller at like 2% owned. I got onto him when I found out that he was like definitely going to play. And he just kind of smashed. And then I had Christian McCaffrey, who I know we talked about on the pod, and he did really well. And Tevin Coleman, I think, was my other running back. So that was my lineup pretty much. And it, yeah.
So you nailed the right game. And you did a little differentiation with the double tight end. Didn't quite pan out, but it could have really paid off if Kittle would have just got to expectation or anywhere even close to what we were all thinking. Myself, I had a bad week in cash only because of one decision. I had Christian McCaffrey. I had pretty much a good lineup, even though I got crazy and played the Bills D in cash. But it was only because what I was able to fit in. But it really came down to Garoppolo versus Mahomes, and I chose Jimmy G. And like when I think back on it, I think it was a huge mistake, and it really just from the standpoint of just laying out the weapons that each receiver had. I mean, each quarterback had at his disposal. I mean, the choice becomes clear at that point, and so I really feel stupid for that looking back. But KillaB, I know you had a good week in cash. So what was the backbone of your good solid week?
Yeah, there's probably like three things there. It was me going with mostly Mahomes. So I had a lot of Mahomes. If I even went cheaper, I don't know if I even really went cheaper, but I had, Roethlisberger, and then a little bit of Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton. So kind of stuck around that mid-range across the industry. But the big thing is I took like a really big stance on the Gurley over Kamara in spots, especially in cash. And then at tight end, I bought a lot of Kelsey where, like John said, most of the field went with Kittle. I kind of faded a little bit of Kittle across the industry and just bought into Kelsey. And that was huge because, I mean, you look at the tight end, there were like 2 huge days. I forget who came in with the second really big day. I think it was the Steelers tight end.
Jesse James.
Yeah, but he had no ownership.
Right.
Nothing.
So, I mean, that's where you kind of set yourself apart. And then like what you said, Kirk, if you didn't hit at quarterback, there were 12 quarterbacks that went over 300 yards this past week. Only 3 running backs went over 100 yards. So, and the running backs are Matt Breida, Lindsey, and then Tevin Coleman. So, I mean, not household names going over 100 yards. So it just really shows you how much the league is transitioning to just a straight up passing league.
F Jimmy Garoppolo. I know we're going to get into him today. So you guys are going to try to convince me to go back there, and we'll get into some of that recency bias because I am going to have it for sure. All right. So we're going to break down the show. The outline for this show is we're just going to, quickly talk about what we kind of already did a breakdown of our results here. So why don't we just get into looking at the schedule for this weekend, what we're thinking. I mean, we've got 2 games that really separate themselves from the pack from implied Vegas total for each. I mean, just a high over-under for each game. And so let's go into the big picture here and then also talk about some of our maybe some of our favorite stacks, our favorite plays, maybe touch on some injury news, and we'll call it a wrap. But those 2 games right off the bat are we've got the big Saints Falcons game in Atlanta in a dome right now with a 53.5 point total. Falcons are favored by 3, and then the other monster total is your boys Mahomes with KC against the guy I cannot stand more than anyone in the world right now, Jimmy G, and San Fran with a 55.5 point total. Is this total too high?
I think it is. I think it is just because of where they're playing in Kansas City. Arrowhead has always been known to be kind of a tough away place to play. I mean, I know KC's defense is just terrible right now, but that 55.5 seems a little too high.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little high, but I could see it going over. I mean, I think most people right now see it as, it's going to go over. I feel like everyone's going to be stacking up both sides of this game. Maybe KC more than San Francisco just because of recency bias, like our friend Chris here with the Jimmy G hate. But, and like George Kittle and how he crushed a lot of lineups last week and, Pettis and all those guys, they definitely hurt him. But Jimmy G, it looks like Goodwin could be back this week, and that's his go-to guy, on the outside. That's a big, weapon that he needs in that offense to kind of stretch the defense and, go downfield. So that's big for me.
That's like the one thing that could get me back on him here by the end of the week. I mean, that is huge. That was his go-to guy last year. They definitely have a rapport. He's the deep threat. We know about this Chiefs defense. yeah, he's also yapping a little bit with Tyreek Hill. Did you guys catch any of that at all?
No,
I missed it.
no.
Well, he tweeted out that he has the Olympic record.
Yeah. They're talking about who's faster.
Yeah,
and,
who's faster. So if he's ready to go, and it looks like it's like 50-50 at this point, I'm thinking he's probably going to be able to go. But if he is ready to go, I mean, he's got to kind of back up what he's been talking a little bit in this game.
He hasn't even caught a catch all year. So he's had one target in week 1, and then he got hurt versus the Vikings. So this is a spot where I expect ownership to be pretty low outside of, getting some ownership because of how high the over-under is. I'm guessing he'll still, I don't know, garner somewhere around 10%, 10 to 15% possibly. But yeah, in a spot where this is Jimmy G's guy, and if you're going to see a wide receiver put up 150 and 2 touchdowns on San Fran, it's going to be Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah,
right. He's 5,800 too on FanDuel. Like that's
really cheap.
That's really cheap. So that's tough to pass.
Something to note about that matchup, though. Sorry, the Chiefs cornerback who will probably match up with him is Steven Nelson, who's been burned forever and ever, and he's now seen 21 targets in coverage this year. He's allowed 150 yards, a touchdown. So if Goodwin is good to go, I mean, game script probably would dictate that, the Chiefs should be playing from ahead in this one, and they're going to need Goodwin to air it out here. So should see a more pass-heavy approach. So, yeah, I definitely have interest in him for sure. And that would be, like I said, it's be the one thing I could get me back to Jimmy G and give him one more attempt to win back my love for him. So what were you going to say, though, KillaB?
Yeah, I like how focused San Fran's offense seems to be. I would like to go back to, though, George Kittle well. His price on DraftKings is $4,500. So he went up $700 after letting everybody down last week. So I think ownership's going to be down. Looks like Jack Doyle is going to be getting some ownership, and then a lot of the studs like the Kelce's and the Gronks should get some, or I should say Gronk's not on the main slate. So, but like Kelce will get probably higher ownership than Kittle. So I wouldn't mind going right back to Kittle. Curious to hear what you guys think about Kareem Hunt. Hasn't been in the passing offense at all. He's only had 2 targets on the year. But I mean, we got to expect that with all the touchdowns Kansas City's putting up, that it's going to start to normalize where he gets more red zone goal line opportunities to punch it in. I think Kareem Hunt is a great play, especially to get away from just the passing side of things for Casey.
I love it, but what do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think he might end up being chalky.
Yeah.
I think by the end of the week, I think people are going to kind of gravitate to playing Kareem Hunt as like a leverage play, and it just get to a point where he's 20% owned or something like that. He is a good play. It's a mispriced, definitely, I think, on DK at $6K. I think it's a misprice there. So I get the play. I'm just probably not going to go there because I can see a way in which Kareem Hunt has another kind of okay or average game. So,
if he doesn't get you touchdowns, I mean, we've already seen Mahomes not really, look to him to do any drop-offs. What I'm surprised is they're just not scheming him in like a few screen passes or more targets in general. Yeah. So that's the concern here. It's not just the catches, it's the targets. He's only had 2 targets.
Yeah. What about the fact that, the secondary for San Francisco, I mean, they got beaten up so bad by, the Lions they have great wide receivers, but they took their number 2 cornerback out of the game halfway through that game. He was getting beat so bad. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a spot where Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, Kelce, even Conley could take advantage of all these guys.
Sure.
Yeah, so when I played Hunt last week and I played Kelce, I was pretty high on both of them for GPP, and I will go right back there. I mean, I think his time to get get in the end zone is obviously going to come. He did get in, on that one reception that he had last week, but they're a home favorite here, which is usually good for running backs. I know it's he hasn't had the targets, but if they're going to game plan, 49ers have been susceptible to in pass catching to the opposing running backs. They've allowed 21 receptions for 122 yards now the last 2 weeks. So maybe Reed is drawing up plays for him as we speak. And I agree with you, John. I think he's going to get some steam here, but he's still not going to be chalk, and we know the kind of upside he showed last season. So this game, monster total. It just really depends on how this game script plays out. But the touchdowns are a concern. But I do think they're coming.
Would you take him over Tevin Coleman or Gio Bernard?
Over Gio, yes.
Okay.
I'm not high on Gio. I'm that's going to be my fade, probably Gio, unless you guys convince me otherwise. Tevin Coleman, I'm not even that crazy about him at this price.
I like him
as well.
I like Tevin in stacks. I don't know about if he will make like cash teams and whatnot, but just switching up in stacks. I think obviously in that game, both running backs are in play. Kamara obviously on the other side. It's just they're so involved in the passing game, and it's nice when even at that price range where you can get 5 to 6 targets, which is the same equity of scoring a touchdown. So.
Well, yeah. How about Tevin Coleman ran all over a Carolina front that was, supposedly really good at stopping the run. Like, he just kind of ran right through him. I mean, he could have easily had 2 touchdowns in that game. Matt Ryan kind of vultured at least 1 or 2 of them, I think, at the end in the end zone. But I think it's a good spot. I'm with you though. It's probably a better stack option than it is just a sole cash option, but. Or like by itself, but I still like to play a lot.
Yeah, and I know we brought up Christian McCaffrey already. Man, he just got peppered with targets on top of targets.
Told you, no Greg Olsen.
I was all in on McCaffrey too.
Perfect game flow, perfect opposition, and he gets another great matchup. So Atlanta was 32, so the worst versus pass catching running backs. And Cincinnati's was second worst last year. No Vontaze Burfict, so you got to like him again coming into this game. The only issue is if Carolina, pulls up with a lead, they are favored by 3 in this game. But, you still got to like him getting 8 to 12 targets.
Yeah, it's the spot. This is a big weakness of the Bengals, like you said, and their weakness is at linebacker. So, this just looks like another good spot. It's not as great as a spot. He checked every single box last week. So his price was still kind of fair. He was $7K as opposed to $7,800 on DK. Atlanta gave up so much production to running back, targets and through the pass, and so he checks that box. He was getting the increased usage. Olsen was out. So those are still in play. He's obviously getting the increased usage. I just think this is a little bit less of a good spot, but I'm still really high on him this week.
Yeah, I'm with you, Chris. I'm still high on him. It's not as good of a spot. And then the price jump. I like him. I just don't know if I'm going to get there with his price at. I think it's $7,800 on DraftKings.
Yep.
But I totally understand it. Like I said, like with Greg Olsen gone, he's the security blanket for Cam Newton. So,
do you think he's game flow dependent on the year? Do you only want to roster them when they're coming from behind, or are you confident enough in his rushing abilities?
I'm not confident in his rushing abilities. I do think he's somewhat game dependent. What I mean by that is I think that C.J. Anderson, I think they want to run C.J. Anderson a little bit.
Oh, he killed that with a fumble last week.
He killed that.
Yeah.
And he had a catch in the fourth quarter that went right off his hands. And I forget if it was a pick or if it was almost a pick, but they took him right out after that. It kind of like stalled the drive, and he should have had a first down. But I think he may be game flow dependent because I don't trust him running in between the tackles.
I do trust him.
You do?
This is what I trust most about. I think the usage is going to be there regardless. I think this is going to be an offense that's going to need to get the ball with their offensive line. It's going to need to get the ball out quick. Cam's going to have to do quick passes, and he's going to get target after target. So I think his pass catching targets will always be there, and he's going to get more than he had last year, at least running between the tackles, and he's their running back. He's their guy. So I think he's just going to be a good play from here on out, depending on what his price and matchup dictates and everything. But another thing I noticed, like, it seems like Cam doesn't even – like, he has room for so much more usage too. Like, Cam, like, misses him so often, like, when he's wide open or, like, looks him off and tries to, like, feed it into double coverage that I think there's just more opportunity to grow.
Yeah, it did take a while for Cam to realize that, last year McCaffrey was a safety valve. I really think they brought in McCaffrey basically to save Cam Newton's career, for him to stop running so much and just drop it off to him. It seems like they're getting, or at least he's bought into that system now this year.
All right. So we're
One
just –
more thing with that game, I do think that a sneaky play in that game is Ian Thomas, 2,800 on DraftKings. I think all the attention's going to McCaffrey. I think Ian Thomas could fly under the radar, and I think he's a guy who Cam might look at in the red zone. Dropped the touchdown last week, 2,800 on DraftKings. If I'm going to, pay down at tight end for anyone, it's probably going to be him, in tournaments.
And he was an every down type of guy. He played 64 or 67 snaps. So, yeah, I like that.
Yep.
All right, a running back pivot off of McCaffrey this week. Saquon Barkley. Interested, anybody?
I want to hear what you have to say first.
7 wide receivers with more targets than Barkley through 2 games. He's Eli's arm strength is definitely in question at this point. The offense is in question at this point in general, but he's the safety valve. He's dynamic rusher. And if he's
breaking news, Tyrod Taylor went back to the locker room, so we might be seeing.
Yes, Baker. All right. Okay.
No. Had to drop that.
Thank you. I looked up for the first time since we started this podcast.
So Barkley, go for you guys.
Okay, so I have issues with these stud running backs on terrible offenses, right? The David Johnsons, the Barkleys. McCaffrey, at least, he's such a big part of that offense. And with Cam, Cam is such a great quarterback that those two can make things happen just with them two. I just feel like there's just not enough, and you're going to start getting defenses. I still think the Texans are a great play, even though they let us down last week. I just think you're going to just scheme against Barkley and make them pass to beat you. Obviously Odell is always there too, but man,
I'm actually expecting Odell to have a pretty good game this week.
Yeah, I like him. I like him too.
I don't know if that's a hot take. I'm glad to hear that you like him as well, John, because from now on I'm going to run every play by you, and you're going to be my advisor.
Just make sure you bring it back with Will Fuller.
Stay with the
I love Will Fuller. That's my boy for sure.
My boy too. Yep.
I mean, yeah, you got plus his price is a little high this week, 5,900.
Yep.
No one's
on FanDuel.
Gets the matchup with Eli Apple, who has looked better this year, but was a disaster last year.
Jim, right now on DraftKings has Odell at 15%. Just a heads up. So that's
higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I feel like that is higher. I mean, obviously it's nowhere near final with these percentage.
Right.
A guy that I'm looking at on DraftKings specifically, just because he's the highest priced wide receiver, is Michael Thomas. We saw last year where he got so much usage on a team that was a run-first team, and now I think the biggest like the guy that got the most usage upgrade because of the Mark Ingram injury has been Michael Thomas. They've had to focus more on throwing the ball, which has totally helped Thomas here. And with them being 3-point dogs, and then the ownership play of him being the highest price, you have Julio Jones $1,000 cheaper. I mean, everybody is going to click on Julio over Michael Thomas. So I like the ownership play of Michael Thomas, and there's always a chance where Thomas outdoes like the top guys by a good 10 points. So,
dude, Thomas is the top guy. Yeah.
The problem is if you had to pay up for one of those guys, would it be Kamara or Thomas?
I mean,
I like the mid-tier running backs this week. So for me, I'd rather pay, I think, mid-tier running backs.
I mean, are you taking a stand on this, or are you gonna have some of both?
Oh, I'm taking a stand for sure. I've taken a stand every week on these high-priced receivers, and I'm not stopping now. I think that Kamara is lower owned. I think he has a better matchup. You just saw what Christian McCaffrey did, and I think Kamara is better than him. I think game flow is going to be in his realm. So Michael Thomas is a great play too. Don't get me wrong. I just rather have Kamara. He's gonna get all the touches. Like I just think he's a better play
and really efficient touches, right? I mean,
right.
We want to see the Saints coming from behind, having to pass like maybe 70-30 versus the run, and we know how much more valuable targets are versus carries. So
I will say though, you can still make a stack with both of them, Thomas and Kamara. I'm just saying it's definitely like one of those things where it's definitely hard to do. You got to kind of find some, cheap tight ends or some cheap wide receivers. Or cheap
you just gotta play Ito Thomas or
at 3K.
Yeah.
Is it Smith? Ito Smith?
Ito Smith. That's what I meant.
I was surprised how many touches. I think he ended up getting like 9 carries, 1 target or something like that. Maybe 2 targets.
Yeah, he got 9 carries, and he looked good too.
I mean, he looked awesome. That's why 3K is pretty tempting. Like,
and I played preseason where he wasn't anything.
He was terrible, right?
Yeah. So that kind of came out of nowhere for me.
I like Kamara a lot. Like you said. So, like, this is a team that's always struggled with the running back pass, or at least giving up tons of production, and they don't have Deion Jones or Keanu Neal anymore, and so. It's just, and this is a concentrated offense, right? Like that's all we keep hearing right now with the Saints. Concentrated. I mean, it's Kamara, it's Michael Thomas, and it's Drew Brees. So the interesting thing, so what are we doing with this game? Let's just this game is so important for DFS this week.
Yeah, you stack it up every which way. I think. The weird part about this, I feel like the running backs are more in play in this game than they are in the San Fran at KC game. So I don't know how much love even like a Matt Breida will get, even though he might be the rushing leader. I don't know if I saw that correctly in the NFL, but I know he went over 100 last week. He's just not getting enough touches at that price point for me to love him. Both running backs in play, and then obviously wide receivers. So the only issue is Kamara and Tevin. You kind of want their touches to come through the air because they're not like. I mean, I guess Tevin's shown pretty good running back skills. Obviously, when Devontae's been out, and he even can touch the ball 25 times. It's just Kamara seems like they're trying to limit him as much as possible. So. You'd rather see the Saints coming from behind in that game if you're doing a stack.
Well, and it was a pretty just gross game in general with the Browns last week. Before that, he was absolutely went nuts. So, I mean, it depends on what we think this game's going to do. I mean, there's a lot of good plays in this game. Let's just go through them. Like Matt Ryan is super cheap for a quarterback play, right, at 5,700.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Drew Brees is the other guy we have to consider. 6,400. Yeah, home road splits. I think he's 6,400. Yep, 6,400. But this is a dome, right? Like he's disappointed against them last year, but I'm not worried about that. They had Mark Ingram last year. I mean, who you guys like both of these guys?
I mean, I will say too, Julio Jones has had good numbers against Marshawn Lattimore like last year. So I think people might. I mean, people will play him, but people will definitely think of that matchup, and I don't think it's a matchup to really fear. Lattimore hasn't even looked that good this year in general, so I don't know. Like,
he's so cheap.
He is cheap, and
I wish he was like 8,600. You know, like he's 7,900. It's so tempting. Like it's like 79.99.
And that's the thing. If he was 8,000, if he was just 8,000,
8,100 even.
That would take so much ownership off of him.
One thing too, I'm thinking about too is Michael Thomas. Just going back to that real quick. The Atlanta Falcons, their cornerbacks don't shadow; they kind of stay on their side. And Michael Thomas I'm pretty sure he's averaged about 31% of the snaps in the slot this year. I might be off on that, but it's around that, I think. And if he gets
he's had 31% in the left slot and 21% in the right slot.
Okay, so if he gets 52%. Matched up with, the slot corner, is it Brian Poole?
Yep, it's Poole. Yeah. So he's gotten 32% of his snaps out of the slot. He's going to match up with Poole, who's their least talented cornerback.
This guy is bad. This guy is really, really bad. So, I mean, from a matchup standpoint, Thomas might actually have the best matchup now that I kind of look at it, and see if they're going to match him up in the slot over 50% of the time, then it might be a really tough fade. I might.
But so both of them are awesome plays.
Right. No. Right.
Both like Kamara and Thomas, and they're so concentrated. So the question is is Ted Ginn worth some shots?
For sure. Ted Ginn still got the speed, man, to break one off.
And he benefits from no Keanu Neal.
If I'm stacking this game up, I'm stacking up the two best players on the team. I'm stacking up Thomas and Kamara and bringing it back with Coleman. Julio might be tough to bring it back with in the stack, and then I might do the opposite and take one of those guys with Julio and Tevin. So I could stack it up all three ways. But I don't know. I don't think I would play Ted Ginn just because I feel like most of the targets are going to be really concentrated towards, the weakness of the Falcons D, which is really not their outside corners, even though they're not the greatest. They're not bad either. I think it's the slot corners and the linebackers. They're going to put them in spots. And so I think Kamara and Thomas are probably the just easy best plays.
Yeah, and I'll just throw a sneaky play out there. Traquan Smith, I know they were talking about trying to get him worked into the offensive plan. So that could be a guy that's going to be, under 2% owned if you're going to stack this game, to throw him out there. Let's see. He got 22 out of 66 snaps last week. So, but, that's the thing. Sean Payton specifically said they need to work a way to get him the ball more.
And Ginn has been limited in practice, so that would be news to monitor, and especially would probably give him, give him a boost if for some reason he's injured or, not letting on to as bad a shape that he may be in. But what about Calvin Ridley, 3,700? He's technically got the best matchup on the field for the Falcons.
I think he's going to be a popular play with his touchdown. I don't think I'm going to go there. I kind of agree with John that I want to stick with more of the studs in this. So, sticking with Julio and Tevin. I don't know if I'm going to get much. If I go with another pass catcher, it's going to be Austin Hooper at 2,900. Just punt the tight end spot.
Yeah,
he's going to be popular.
Who, Calvin Ridley or Austin?
No,
Hooper?
Austin Hooper.
Oh, I have no problem. Fading Austin Hooper, to me, I rather play Ian Thomas. I know they're right around the same price, but I get why people like him. I just don't like the fact that Matt Ryan, again, his targets, he just spreads it around or he throws it to Julio. He doesn't have like a second guy. Like Austin Hooper is the second leading target guy on that team with 9. Like I don't love that. I'm not like comfortable with that. Calvin Ridley, he had a good game last week, but again, I get the play. It could be Mohamed Sanu this week. You know what I mean? I don't see him honing in on a second guy.
Another 3,700 guy that I really like, who hasn't been getting a lot of talk. I think I started hearing a little bit more talk this week, is Tyler Boyd at 3,700. I mean, he's getting the snaps. He's basically the wide receiver 2 in Cincy. But with John Ross's speed and him being a high draft pick last year, it's kind of like just the noise is.
Is he going to be chalk this week?
Boyd, I think I've seen somewhere around 10% on him. So
okay,
he's 3,700 on DraftKings. Possibly going to be a little bit chalkier. But what I've noticed is like a lot of the cheap wide receivers that aren't like obvious plays, they're usually never more than like 10 to 12.
Right. Yeah. So not chalk as in, I just meant like he's going to be owned. Like people are going to actually go that route more, than 10%, like 15%.
Yeah. Big news too, injury wise, is what's going to happen with Philly. If Corey Clement becomes the guy, if both Ajayi and Sproles are out, that's, getting a cheap guy like that is going to just, monkey around with ownership percentages at running back. So I can see him being pretty popular by the end of the week here.
Yeah. So let's quickly, because we're running over time like we always do, let's quickly touch on that game, because I'm kind of interested in like Carson Wentz. Like, I don't know what to expect from him, but like if you're going to tell me that they're not going to have much of a running game, their running back is a better pass catching back, and they're going to have a concentrated Eagles passing game, then maybe he's in play at 6,200. I definitely like Nelson Aguilar from getting the targets, and Zach Ertz for sure. Like that's where all the production should go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I just like the first thing, honestly, when I pulled up the salaries on DK was I noticed Nelson Aguilar at 61, and I noticed Zach Ertz, and I'm just like, these are where all the targets are going. Like this is where the offense go. Then I saw Carson Wentz is going to come in, and I'm like, how do I not like Carson Wentz?
And a Swiss cheese secondary, inexperienced secondary.
Yeah. It makes sense. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I'm going to play those guys, so I probably will end up on Carson Wentz.
Unless they go Wendell Smallwood with really only like a pass-catching back. Like, so
I mean, I think Wendell Smallwood's going to get some carries no matter what. Like, he's going to get some
for sure.
You know what I mean? Corey Clement's going to get maybe 60, 70% if all Jay Ajayi and Sproles are out. But Wendell Smallwood will get 30% of the work at least.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting too. And then if you bring it back, I mean, it's kind of easy to bring it back. You've had T.Y. Hilton get 2 11 target games. And, I was concerned. I didn't have any ownership in him last week, but I'm still waiting for them to get back into the dome, to utilize the speed. Obviously in Philly is usually not a spot where I'd want to play an opposing wide receiver, but Philly's shown like pretty terrible defense so far the first 2 weeks. So,
and they're stronger against the run. So, I mean, the way to beat them right now is the pass.
Right.
So, Colts see that. That's what they're going to do.
Running out of time quickly, are we overlooking Aaron Rodgers?
Well, he didn't practice today, so that's something to keep an eye on. I'm more or less, until he gets his legs back, I think Aaron Rodgers is off. If he's not going to give you, potentially 20 to 30 yards scrambling or even a possibility of a touchdown run, I'll just never be drafting him.
Yeah, there's too many, like, besides Pat Mahomes, there's too many, like, cheaper quarterbacks, like Matt Ryan. You said Carson Wentz, like
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, yep.
Cam Newton.
12 quarterbacks over 300 yards.
Any interest in Andrew Luck? Like, could he somehow, like, I know his ADOT is terrible. Is that when you want to be on the game ahead of time? If he,
I think I rather Wentz than Luck, but that's just me.
Yeah, Wentz. Good. I'm glad you're on board with Wentz, because he was like when I first was first looking at him, I was like, man, this is so tempting, but I don't know what to expect from him.
Right. That's what scares me is I want to see him throw first. I'm like I said, I'm definitely going to have Aguilar and Ertz together, so I'm going to have maybe at least one Wentz team, but I'm going to have more shares of those guys.
Yeah, and these secondary game stacks, when you're not looking at the top 2 games, they're going to be a lot lower owned. So this is a game that I definitely keyed up. There's a few other spots where I'm already building stacks. So yeah,
one sneaky stack is going to be the Rams. The Rams with Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, and my man Cooper Kupp. He is so mispriced on DraftKings. He's 4,900.
I'll throw. There's another one too, right next to him, who's so mispriced. Who's got huge upside too. He doesn't have the red zone usage, but from a big play standpoint, is Robert Woods.
It's the Robert Woods week.
No, I don't. But I know there's going to be a Robert Woods, and it might very well be this week. And when that week happens, I want to be on it if he's 5,100.
Yeah. Goff.
Yeah, I'm staying away from Casey Hayward. I think he'll be seeing a lot of Casey Hayward, so I want to stay inside.
They're expecting potentially Hayward to shadow Cooks.
Oh, Cooper Kupp or Cooks?
Cooks, yeah.
Okay.
Which in theory would leave Woods, and Kupp is the red zone guy.
Yeah.
So
these are the type of wide. Oh, sorry. These are the type of wide receivers that I am really concerned of when they go up against elite cornerbacks. So normally when I'm talking about like stud wide receivers, I don't look into the cornerback matchup as much. Plus they move around stud wide receivers, but a guy like, a Robert Woods or a Cooks, if they're getting somewhat shadowed by Casey Hayward, that's something to note for sure.
All right, last thing, back to our original game. We'll end the pod here. Any Sammy Watkins love for anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I had a little bit of him last week, so I'm going to stick right there with it. I mean, this game sticks out so much with implied that I think you want to have shares of anybody that's a big part of this offense.
Yeah, I mean, what did San Francisco give up? Like, all 3 of the Lions receivers had good games last week. I think at least I know one of them at over 100 yards and 2 of them at least had touchdowns. So
right.
I definitely want receivers or tight ends, pass catchers from this game, multiple. So Watkins has got to be one of them.
All right. Watkins has got to be one of them. That's how we're going to end this podcast. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in again, and we will catch you next week. Wish both of you guys the best of luck again. But can you bless me, John, with a little bit of
stop winning all the money, John.
All right. Good luck, Chris. I hope LaShawn McCoy pans out for you.
Domingo Santana helped finally got some money back on Domingo last week. For anyone who watches our baseball shows,
look at that. You made it back from the last,
No, it's like I got like a 1% back.
I love how John actually gave you the blessing too.
I did. I gave you the blessing. You saw that.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll catch you next week. This is the RG NFL DFS Tournament Takes podcast. Thanks.